This is White Plains Week, the weekly news roundup. With your moderator, John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains CitizeNet Reporter. Jim Benerofe, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And Peter Katz, noted broadcaster and journalist. White Plains Week. What's happened? Who are the newsmakers? And what's in store for the future? The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented Fridays at 7:30 and again on Mondays at 7 p.m. here on Channel 76. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains. This is John Bailey, the CitizenNet Reporter on White Plains Week, the City News Roundup show. This evening, as our guest, we have the Assemblyman from the 89th Assembly District, Robert Castelli, talking about Albany, White Plains, and issues. And joining me tonight is Nancy King of the Westchester Guardian and a political reporter, veteran news lady, to work with Mr. Castelli today. Peter Katz and Jim Benerofe, my usual partners, are on assignment tonight. But first, the White Plains Week 3-minute news update. It was hot in White Plains, New York, USA this week. Temperatures hot and humid in the 90s with no break in sight. The county advised people not to swim, boat, or fish in the Hudson River due to about 100 million gallons of raw sewage being pumped into the Hudson River at 135th Street in New York due to a fire Wednesday afternoon. And it's still going on as we tape this program Friday morning. The county advised John Callahan, City Chief of Staff, announced a 4-year settlement with the Civil Service Employees Union, calling for no raise in the current fiscal year and 2% raises for the next 3 years. New CSEA employees will pay more of a share of health benefits while employed and after they retire. The city did not commit to no layoffs in the next 3 years. Terminated CSEA employees were not rehired. Negotiations with police, fire, and Teamsters unions continue. The city manager of information services, John Stewart, resigned his $130,000 a year position with the city. He is the first of appointed managers to leave. Rebuilding Winbrook is years away, WPCNR learned this week. Management of the White Plains Housing Authority acknowledged to this reporter that the Winbrook rehab project approved 2 years ago is now seeking financing by interested parties in addition to HUD funding. The Housing Authority executive said to me, it may take years before the project will start. They blame the economy. The council committed $1.5 million of city money towards construction of a headquarters building for the Youth Bureau on the Winbrook property. The mayor said the city will spend the money only if HUD approves a grant proposal rejected previously. HUD has asked for an additional $3.5 million towards the $5 million building. The Westchester County Executive Robert Astorino called for the state government to make financing of the Tappan Zee Bridge an immediate priority. Construction was supposed to begin in January, and no financing has been found yet. The county executive also announced he has hired Rosa Boone of White Plains, executive director of the Westchester Coalition for the Hungry and Homeless, as deputy commissioner of social services for $127,125 a year. Shirlita Amler was appointed former commissioner of health at Putnam County, was appointed commissioner of health at $172,000 a year. And Natasha Caputo, formerly of the New York City Tourism Agency, was hired for $118,965 a year to be the director of tourism and film. And now, to White Plains Week's guest tonight, Assemblyman Bob Castelli of Pound Ridge, representing White Plains in the 89th Assembly District. Mr. Castelli, thank you for coming on to the program.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to be here, John.
Mine too. Now, just to background you, Mr. Castelli first ran for the Assembly against Adam Bradley in 2004, losing 25,000 votes to 17,000. He is a survivor, though, and when Assemblyman Adam Bradley was elected mayor in 2009 unopposed, Mr. Castelli was tapped again by White Plains Republicans to oppose popular up-district legislator Peter Harcum in a special election to fill the rest of Bradley's term. Mr. Castelli shocked the handicappers by defeating Harcum with 55% of the vote in a low turnout, and then had to win a term in his own right against Tom Roach in November last year. Mr. Castelli shocked all by defeating Mr. Roach in a heavily Democratic district by 112 votes in a heavy turnout contest. Fifth in the state, you said.
Yeah, the fifth highest attended in the state.
Right. And he is now our Assemblyman for the next 17 months, not having to run again into November 2012. A relief. And start the questioning. Nancy King.
Nancy, how are you?
Oh, it's nice to see you again, Bob. What's going on in Albany? We've got a budget on time. We've got a tax cap. Things are moving forward. How's the tone and the tenor up there?
It's incredible, and we're doing our job right for change.
I am amazed, thrilled, and happy.
You know, I said to one of my colleagues, I said, you know, when all of this happens, everyone's going to be sitting there glad-handing each other and patting each other on the back. But the reality is, all we're doing is what we always should have done. You know, as you know, I got up there the previous session, and I kind of hit the ground running because I took the seat on February 22nd. You know, and I was touched by that. It was kind of prophetic, and I must tell you this because I took the oath of office on Lincoln's birthday, and I took the seat and was voted in on Washington's birthday.
Yeah, I do remember that.
You know, and I'm a fan of them, and you know, being somebody who respects these positions tremendously, I was touched by that. But I was told by my colleagues that last year was the single worst year they'd ever seen in 20 years. And having said that, and as that being my barometer, this year has been 100% better. Now, let me say this to you. Everyone shouldn't be, you know, jumping for joy yet, because 100% better from last year means we're 50% of where we need to be. But you know what? We got a budget on time for the first time in years. I mean, I think we've only had 3 on-time budgets in more than 20 years. And kudos to the governor for that, because a lot of this I have to give him credit for. His leadership, leading from the front, doing it dynamically, taking in all the stakeholders, and looking at all the options there and coming up with reasonable solutions, I think is what made this happen. And I think both of the leaders, you know, Speaker Silver compromised more than I'd seen him in the last session, as well as, you know, our new leader in the Senate. So collectively, everybody decided to work together, and it just goes to show that when you work together, you get things done.
So would you say that there is a spirit of bipartisanship in Albany that we haven't seen previously in the last 20 years?
I mean, you know, I went up there with my own mandate, and that was that if I was going to accomplish anything, any idiot can make friends with your friends. Making friends with your potential adversaries is what works. And I looked across the aisle and I said, before I leave the session, I will have walked over there, shaken hands with every man and woman there, and say, hi, I'm Bob Castelli. I'd appreciate your advice and counsel. I'd like you to help me work to help the people of my district. Not a one person rejected me, and I will tell you I was mentored very well by people on that side of the aisle as well as my own. And it is a reason why I've managed to accomplish kind of more than I thought I would. Less than I wanted to, but so far more than I thought I could.
Yeah. Awesome. What do the legislators in Albany hope to accomplish in 2012? What's the mindset?
Well, I think, you know, the governor has, God bless him, gotten 95% of the agenda he set out, you know, in his election done in the first 6 or 8 months. Now, he started the process. Let us not, you know, make this unclear to people. It's not a fait accompli. It took years to get Albany all messed up. We're not fixing it in one session. This is not a panacea. But we are reversing the pattern of the ship of state being sinking. We're starting to bail it out, and we're trying to keep it afloat. So the good news is we did a lot which will be necessary to do that. Okay? Moving forward, what's the most important thing we need to do is look for immediately short-term mandate relief, Medicaid reform, labor reform, and long-term mandate relief. Now, that long-term mandate relief, the governor has always said, will come in the form of a Tier 6 system within the state system. Now, Tier 6, when employed, will theoretically in 30 years save us $90 billion. Now that's $90 billion in the context of $135 billion total budget. Adding to what Tier 5 savings were, that's $120 billion savings moving forward over the next 30 years.
Tier 6 would apply to new people being hired?
Absolutely.
I
And that's
see.
the rub, because the tax cap is not a panacea.
Right.
Without real short-term mandate relief, it may hurt jurisdictions rather than help them. I spoke to the governor. I spoke to him the night that the bill was signed. And you know, and I said to him, I said, well, we need more than a drop in a bucket with this mandate relief. And he said, this is the only consensus we could get to put it in this omnibus bill in the time. But it is an ongoing process. This is fluid, not static. He gave me his word that he's going to continue to work towards this. Thus far, he's been a man of his word, and I'm taking him at it. So I think the short-term goal is short-term mandate relief, Medicaid reform, and labor reform.
What kind of Medicaid reform is the governor talking about here?
He is waiting on the panel to come back and present them specific recommendations. As you know, Medicaid accounts for more than 40% of our total budget, almost $52 billion. Now, that's a lot of money. And let me put it in the context of how we have to look at this. That's more than California and Florida pay for Medicaid, and if you add them up collectively, it is 3 times the population of New York. So there's something broke in this system. It is so bad that we, in our revenue bill each year, build in $100 million in anticipated fraud recovery. Well, if we expect to recover $100 million in fraud, that means it's probably 3 times that we're not seeing, that we can't catch. But that's systemic of a system that is broken.
It is.
And it needs to be revamped.
Is the state going to do more belt tightening, cutting expenses in departments like it did this year?
I think that is the case. Originally when I ran for office, and it was very similar to what the governor said later on when he ran for office, you needed to have a compilation of things. You needed to shrink the size of government. You needed to look at the things like public-private partnerships and the potential for outsourcing. I mean, sometimes private business, and we got great businesses here in White Plains and around the district, will do things better and cheaper than we can do in government. And when those opportunities avail themselves, we should jump on them.
What will you be working on specifically for White Plains and Pound Ridge, Lewisboro, and the district this year?
Harrison, Normonk, your oddly shaped area.
I got to just, before I answer that question, I got to tell you, I mean, I'm fascinated by this district. It's a tremendous honor to work here. But it's also the most diverse district in the state. We are at once the most wealthy, or the second most wealthy in the entire state. We have a city, an airport, 3 colleges, a medical school, 2 prisons, an airport, and farms on the northern end of the district. So I've got Fortune 500 companies here. I got farms in the top.
Right?
Exactly. So the diversity of this is fabulous. And from the standpoint of the district, what we're trying to do here in White Plains specifically is recreate the Empire Zone, which is going to give tax incentives, obviously, to businesses coming in and hopefully businesses who plan to expand within the White Plains area. This is a shot in the arm economically for White Plains. I know Tom Roach, who is our mayor here,
Tom Roach,
who I ran against, as you know, and I, by the way, become good friends with since then, which says something about civility in politics once again.
As I have civility in politics?
Well, yeah, you know
I'm
what?
Shocked.
Between myself, Tom Roach, and Peter Harcum, all of whom ran against each other, and at the end of the day, all 3 became friends.
And you do have to work with one another.
Well, and you know what? And that's the point. They are gentlemen. I'm a gentleman. We entered those races that way. We emerged that way and became friends. And it's my pleasure to work with them to make this a better district.
How does White Plains get into the governor's economic zone gravy train?
Well, I think it's already been discussed, quite honestly, and I brought it up.
What does White Plains have to do to qualify?
Well, I think we already had sort of a dormant economic development zone here. And so right now, I think it's simply a matter of just giving that a shot in the arm, resurrecting the previously existing program, and having the governor and his team, in economic development, get behind it and give us the shot in the arm we need, because White Plains is a vibrant community. There are tremendous opportunities for businesses here outside of New York City, and yet close enough to the city to be within target range in 25 minutes. So there's much that can be done, and the governor and his economic development people will take the lead, I'm hoping,